All right, I'm from Detectify. My name is Frans, and it didn't work. No, okay. The intentions were good, but it's connection lost. Okay, game over. All right, so my name is Frans. I call myself a white hat, and I'll try to explain later why I say that. I'm a knowledge advisor at Detectify, which basically means that I try to figure out a bunch of vulnerabilities that Detectify can use inside our application, which is a service for basically scanning websites for vulnerabilities. I blog about stuff that I have found on our labs blog. Does anybody know about HackerOne here? HackerOne? Like two over there. Okay, they know it because they know about it. Okay, so HackerOne is a marketplace for companies that want to utilize the crowd to find security issues. And as a thank you to the researchers, they're able to give them money. So basically, Twitter, for example, they use HackerOne. And that means that if you find a vulnerability in Twitter, you can go to HackerOne and sign up, and then you can tell Twitter about the vulnerability, and they will pay you money for it. And there's a bunch of companies doing this. It's like a huge market, like Pentagon. The US government actually started on HackerOne launching a bug bounty for hacking the Pentagon, which is crazy. And I've been doing it since it started, I'll talk a little bit about what it is and what can actually happen by using this. I also, anybody knows about Patreon? Like a site for crowdfunding YouTubers, basically. And I hacked them before they went mainstream. That means that they actually got hacked big time last year. So the whole database went out on like torrents. The whole database, the whole source code, everything. And when I saw that, I knew that, okay, this is actually something that I reported to them that they didn't care about. So I was like, holy shit, they will probably think that I was the one hacking them, but that wasn't the case. So they were like standing with the pants down and not fixing this vulnerability, which was obvious. And so they got hacked just because they didn't fix the problem. I also made Slack remove tokens on GitHub. That was like 2 weeks ago. So we got a bunch of news about it. Basically, people were posting API tokens on GitHub. That's a huge deal, which is sad. You should never commit tokens to source code. And Slack actually looks for Slack tokens on GitHub as we speak, which is kind of cool. But the thing is, I haven't worked with security for a long time. I started 3.5 years ago. And it started with PayPal. PayPal actually went out 3.5 years ago with an email telling people that if you find a vulnerability in PayPal, we will pay you money. We don't care if you don't work for us. If you tell us about it and don't expose it publicly, we're gonna pay you money. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I was like, I registered an account. I registered a merchant account on PayPal and started fiddling around with it and like playing with it. And I had a bunch of friends telling me what I was supposed to look for. So I was just digging around, and suddenly I find an issue that like it wasn't supposed to be like that. So I did what they said, like new email, right to PayPal, and they actually, like I sent the email and nothing more. Like I waited for like 2 months, and after 2 months I get an email back, and it says like, hey Frans, thanks. Like we see that this is an issue. You're right. And what's your PayPal address? Because we want to send you $750. And I was like, what? Like that's the kind of email you throw in the bin. Like you don't keep that. That's spam. Like I want your PayPal address. I want to give you money. But that was true. Like they actually sent me those money because they actually identified it being a real issue. And when that happened, a bunch of other companies started this. They started the same thing. They went out and said that we're going to pay you money if you tell us about vulnerabilities that we have. which basically made me freak out, totally freak out. So I started hacking all these companies just because they went out and telling people that it's okay to hack us if you tell us about it. So I was so insane in doing this, I actually went to holiday in Thailand with my girlfriend. And during this holiday, I get an email saying that there's a new company launching a bug bounty, which was Meraki, which is owned by Cisco. And I was like, the best time to actually find vulnerabilities is when this like bug bounty program starts. That's like, you can find low-hanging fruit, you can find easy vulnerabilities for it, and you can actually make a fair amount of money. So I actually didn't have any laptop with me. So I had my iPhone, and I wrote a bookmarklet that would make me view the source of the, of the page. So during a night in Thailand, I was actually pen testing Meraki and sending them reports with print screens from my iPhone, telling them like, this is a vulnerability, and I'm really sorry sending you print screens from an iPhone, but I'm in Thailand for holiday. And I spent the whole night in Thailand posting vulnerabilities, and I sent them 22 emails with separate vulnerabilities. And I went to bed, like in the morning, went to bed, I was like, yeah, this was fun, like I don't know what this is gonna result in. And I woke up in the evening the same day, and I had 2 emails from Meraki, which sent me $4,000 for these 22 emails, and which was like crazy for me. That was like this is going to be huge. This is going to be big. I'll come back to that. So I had a talk for the PHP meetup about 1 year ago. And I talked about one thing which PHP did very, very interesting and most likely wrong. And what I explained about at that time, this is going to be more technical, so you know. I will move over between technical and fun. So if you like sleep, I can wake you up when fun's no. So technical. PHP did this. And what I'm doing here is basically, there's a function in PHP called parse URL, which basically validates a URL and gives you the parts of the URL, like what is the host, what's the protocol, what's the user credentials inside this URL. So what I found at this time was that if you are providing it with backslashes inside the user credential part of a real URL, PHP will tell you that the host is actually x.com. As you see, it's supposed to be like that as you look at it, but it's not actually how browsers work. Because if you do the same thing in a browser, you insert the same sort of URL and use the create element, the anchor link, which is basically a way to parse the URL in JavaScript. And you ask for the host name, it will say y.com. So there's a difference between how PHP parses URLs and how browsers actually do it. Browsers are very, very nice to users. They want to like make something easy. So what they're doing is that they're replacing all the backslashes with front slashes, which basically means that it's actually a y.com URL. And we had a discussion on the last PHP conference that I did this talk with, and we discussed like what's the RFC, like the standard, what it's supposed to do, like what's the purpose of this, or what's the meaning of parsing this sort of URL. And this is very like hard to understand, but basically what it says is that backslash has nothing to do there. This is basically an invalid URL. So you can understand why browsers are trying to be helpful, but you cannot understand why PHP tried to be helpful also in a wrong way. So PHP did the wrong thing. And what happened was that I went to Munich for a PHP conference, and I met one of the core developers in PHP, and I told him like, yeah, you should look at this parse URL thing, and he was like, what's wrong with that? It's perfect. And I was like, no, it's not perfect. Look at this RFC, like 3986, look at it. And he was like, oh, interesting. I'll get back to you. And he never got back to me, anything. But suddenly I looked at the source code of PHP, and a little commit went in, fixing this. And he didn't give me any credit for it, and he was just like, this is the RFC, and like, which was hilarious, and I'm happy it's got fixed. But it was still like, you should have like thanked me or something. Whatever, so URL parsing in PHP did wrong, now it does the right thing. Another URL parsing seems to be really hard for both backend coding and browsers, was that Firefox had a really fun way to parse URLs. So what do you think will happen if you have this header sending you to this domain? Where will you go? Anybody? All right, so Chrome and Safari says, hell no, I don't know. I don't care. This is, I don't know what to do with this. Don't even think about it. However, Firefox just send you to example.com. They're like, this stuff afterwards, we don't like it. So send to example.com. And I told them, and they just put a CVE on it, which is basically an identification number for a vulnerability. And you might ask then, okay, so URL parsing, and why is this bad? Like, what does this correlate with in real life and your Facebook surfing? What can you actually do with this? And both these URLs problem, both the PHP one and the Firefox one, is actually very, very much exploitable. And one example of this is Prezi. Prezi is basically a online presentation application, which basically does this zooming all over the place. And Prezi also has a bug bounty. I found a way for them to actually redirect. So they have a redirect endpoint on their website. And this redirect endpoint basically says that if this domain is on prezi.com, I will transfer you to that for free. And they actually allow this. So as soon as you provided it with this, it thought like, yeah, this is prezi.com. It has some stuff there, but this is subdomain. Like, nothing wrong with that. But what happened with Firefox was that it was suddenly sending you to example.com. And why is Prezi so careful about only allowing URLs to be sent to Prezi? Well, if you know about this Facebook Connect, there's a button on sites to be able to log in with Facebook. Basically super easy. You press on it, you're signed in to Facebook, and it will just log you in. Super nice. You don't need to provide any credentials or whatever. And that protocol called OAuth basically relies on something that says redirect URI. So what happened is that when you press the button, you will go to Facebook. Facebook will then see if you're logged in and if you have approved Prezi to be an application that you want to sign into. And if you have, it will send you to an allowed address on Prezi.com. But since Prezi.com had an open redirect, using our Firefox way to bypass this, that means that we end up on example.com with the access token sent to example.com, which could be any page, whatever. So every person that had already signed in with Facebook on Prezi, I would able to just send them this link, and it would automatically tell the access token to access their Facebook. And as soon as you have the access token for their Facebook, you could do a bunch of stuff. In this case, you were able to like publish actions. You can get their email. You can do really much stuff with this. And I told Prezi about it. I told them like Firefox has a problem. It will be fixed, most certainly, because this is wrong. But you should know that since you have this Prezi redirect URL allowing you to fuss around with the subdomains, you can actually make a bypass of this. So they went back to me and told me like, yeah, this is valid. Like, here's $1,000, and we're going to increase the amount because you have an account takeover possible. So you can actually make a lot of bad stuff only with like not parsing URLs properly. And other browsers has other problems. I'll speak about the special little snowflake called Safari. If you're web developers, you always know that like a few years ago, Internet Explorer was like Internet Explorer, I hate Internet Explorer. Safari, same thing at this state. Like it's crazy how bad it is. And it's so much tweaks and so much weird handling. You can't really see that they've used WebKit as the source, which is also what Chrome used in the beginning. Like, you can't really see that anymore because there's so much stuff that is just broken. And one example of this is on Safari 6. And this is basically a really, really weird URL. This basically means that I'm sending you to a HTTPS protocol, but the URL is a JavaScript with an alert. And this, in all the other browsers, will just, no, hell no. This is invalid, about blank, for example. But what happens is that when you have a target blank, meaning open a new window, in Safari, you will open a new window with this selected, like the address was selected. So if you just pressed enter on that one, the page that had it was still in the context. So you could access everything on that domain. Even though it was open a new blank window, it still remained being on, in this case, Trello. Which is, like, this is a screwed up bug. And GitHub had the same thing. Like, you could click me and press enter, open a new window, press enter, and then github.com. And this is just, how does this work? Like, crazy browsers. Safari 8 wasn't better at all. They had also a really weird bug, and this is it had some social engineering to it, but still weird. So basically, you went to Google.com and opened the console, like the web console, and you wrote that it should output JavaScript alert document domain in the console. Nothing happens, of course. It says JavaScript alert document domain. However, if you provide the double slash to it and a new line, and this is like in JavaScript land, double slash means comment, and 0A means new line, so that means it's a new line running the script. If you had this script inside the console and press that one, you would actually, you would actually run it on Google.com. And that means, okay, so you should make someone insert that into console log. They can just insert alert document domain. So yeah, of course. But if you have mixed content on your web page, mixed content means basically you're running HTTPS and then you have some content having HTTP stuff. So basically in this case, it will say in the console, like, hey, your page at its HTTP address runs something that is HTTP. And I was like, can I use this to actually plant the payload inside the console? Just having it in the console, accidentally clicking it will trigger the JavaScript. So I tried to append it to the URL, but it still allowed you, it still combined the whole chunk as a URL. So I was like, is there some character that this URL creator in the console would actually split the URLs and create two of them? And it ended up in being, yeah, like the double quote. Double quote would split the URL and run a new URL. And if you click that one, you will have the XSS on this domain, which is bad. So basically this was a UXSS, but you need to find a URL with mixed content. You need to use the fragment payload to inject the script in the console, and then social engineer someone to open the console and click that link, and then you will abuse them. So it's extremely far-fetched, but it's still what the fuck. Safari 9 made it easier. They banned JavaScript URLs as per default. You need to actually go inside and allow that. So that was great. This was actually a good thing that Safari did for once. But Chrome isn't better. Chrome has some other fun stuff. I haven't really figured out the security impact of this thing. It's just weird, and I wanted to show it because it's fun and it has movement and a movie. So view source of Chrome basically shows a really colorful syntax highlighted HTML. What it also shows you is that if you have links inside the view source, they will be clickable. You can click these ones. And you could also do it with JavaScript, which is very, very weird. Like, you can actually run JavaScript in view source, which is not sane at all. It won't have the domain though, so you will not able to make like requests internally in this domain. It will be like orphan, basically not being allowed to do anything. And all these URLs, like, they have a pattern looking for specific URLs that you can click on and do stuff with. So you can't really insert it wherever. But some of the logic shows that you're able to inject this. You can even inject it in a bold. So if you have a source in a bold, you can actually get the JavaScript trigger there if you click on it. And the only thing I've found that I can actually do with this, and you're very welcome to play around with this because it's still there. I haven't told them. I don't see the security impact in that sense. But what you can do is that if you find a way to inject this in the view source, you're able to read the content around it, which is interesting. Like, you can actually get the secret out of that, and you can maybe do something with that. And there's also a way to, like, can't get a person to go to view source. You can't tell anybody to do that. However, if you have a meta refresh, you can redirect to view source. So you can actually play around with this and trying to figure out a way to actually plant a payload that somebody accidentally clicks, and that will make stuff happen. And you can also make the syntax highlighting thing like interactive. So I made some game with with the view source, which is fun. And this is also like, what happened there? Like, how can you? I don't know. It's something weird. And so I started now with browsers, and I will move backwards to the back-end stuff. But I will continue in the middle, which is basically template injection. So template injection, are you working with like JS templating, like React, Ember, Angular? Anyone? Yeah, cool. So if you know about how JS templating works, this is like a 101 on how it works, just to give you a head start on how it works. So basically, you have a web page, and this is how like JS templating are supposed to work. You inject the templating application, could be Ember, React, or whatever, and then you have tags, handlebars, that says what type of data you should have, and it will make a request to an API, having the content that's supposed to be inside this content, inside the DOM. And what will happen is that as soon as it fetches that, it will parse it and present it in the DOM properly. And what happened here is that, oh, it should be there. Okay, so basically what happens is that if you insert something inside the DOM without using this proper method of using an API. And this is user controlled. I've told this system that my name is Frans. So if I provide that already in the DOM, even though it's sanitized properly, you can't insert like a JavaScript tag or whatever, the templating network, like framework will actually like, you're screwed. Like, we won't help you with this. And you might see that, okay, this doesn't make sense, but it actually does for people like moving slowly over to templating system. And we've seen this a lot, where you have also user-provided content inside the DOM, but also using a React framework or Ember or whatever, applying the dynamic stuff to that. And one of the guys that has broken Angular to its knees is Mario Heidrich. And Mario Heidrich is like the worst best friend of Angular. He's found so many payloads that breaks Angular by abusing its sandbox, because it has a sandbox. It went so far, so he's finding some super weird ways to actually inject these parts. And they're always trying to prevent this. They're always trying to get it fixed. But he finds a way all the time, and there's a bunch of people doing it. So when I knew this, I wasn't like approaching Angular at all. I was like, let's take a look at Ember. Ember tries to do something similar. They don't say that they have a sandbox, but they basically have that. Sandbox meaning that you should not be able to trigger JavaScript by yourself and stuff like that. So there's an old way for injecting something in the DOM that would create a JavaScript. So the old Ember.js had a way to say that I want to have a tag, and I would want to have the content of it as alert1, which will trigger as a JavaScript. And I found one place where I was able to inject this in the DOM. But the problem was that quotes was being like not allowed at all in this context. So I was like, I need the word script. Where can I find this? And it actually ended up in being like a way for me to find the window object and find a script and find the node name of a script, which is script, which actually triggered a vulnerability. And at that time, I also, I told Ember, I told them, you should probably fix this. And at the time, they also released version 2 of Ember. And the view thing was gone. You were not able to create, arbitrary elements with whatever name you want. But the interesting thing was that you could also do something really weird, which was, creating an input with autofocus, with an event on autofocus, running an action which is down the line to jQuery's parse HTML, together with a value down the line to the fragment of a URL. Basically meaning, if you have a URL with a fragment of an XSS and you are able to inject this in the DOM, you will have an XSS triggered. So I told them, your version 1 is broken by this way, and your version 2 is broken by this way. And they just, no, we don't care. We don't have a sandbox, which the clients think they do, but they didn't. So they were like, yeah, but if you look at it in a wide perspective, if you insert something in the DOM, that's vulnerable by itself, which is not what people think, at least. Not just because they have a templating system and you're able to inject HTML. Why shouldn't it be able to inject sanitized HTML to it? No, because it will trigger as Ember elements. I'm moving backwards to the stack. So now I'm going to web pages in general. So Git, a year ago or 2 years ago, I was like, okay, so people are having their web roots as their Git root, which sucks. And I was like, okay, let's try this. So I made a automatic scanner looking for Git head. And at that time, there were a bunch of people doing it. And you might see, okay, so they have a Git in the web root. What could possibly go wrong? Oh boy. So what happened was that I did a little command to download everything that a valid Git directory was supposed to have. And I downloaded, and then there's a command called git ls files, which is list all the files in my repository. And by using this head, index, branches, and refs, you were able to list all the files in that repository being on that web page. And you might, okay, so my files, you just see the list. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem was that the people having this was, they were not doing it properly. So one had a web root db.sql. Imagine what that could be, right? Another one had the client vpn.zip. And I was like, this could be interesting. Another one having some backups, holy shit, what this plugin is doing wrong. Predictable URLs to a latest backup DB. Crazy. Also having some server keys, which is not that good. I opened the client's VPN zip. I couldn't resist. I found the pass1.txt. Imagine what is in that one. Yeah, I did not log into the VPN. I told them, and they were like, suddenly it was removed silently. Also, another thing that I found was the private key, as I showed you. Also, there's if you're working with Heroku or anything, you might have stumbled upon environment variables, and some of them are putting them in, I think it's Ruby or Rails or something, in a .env file. So I found a .env file, like blah blah blah.com/.env, and that was all the environment variables for the credentials for the database, production database, Redis, what else? Like Sentry, and like this was, they were so screwed. And when I told them, they came back to me with a document explaining what the process they did. It was hilarious. Creating a war room, spinning credentials, eating lasagna. Like it was very, very much fun. And they actually told me that it was AWS, that the CloudFormation way to deploy a Ruby app was doing wrong. It had a bug in it, which they actually reported and they got fixed. So a bunch of people had .env publicly available just by using Ruby. And how do you prevent this? Like one reason, like one super simple thing is like disallow everything with a dot beginning with it. Like that's the super easy thing. The most logical thing would be to have an actual web root, like not having it, the web root the same thing as the document root, which is two separate things. So you should have a directory inside your code, which is like, this is exposed publicly, public, whatever, web. Symfony does this, for example, by standard. Another thing with Heroku and Docker and environment variables, you probably know where I'm reaching for. So Heroku and Docker is awesome. Like you're able to like create, scale, you can like create a build pack, says whatever you should do. Everything is like super clean and like it's shared among containers, which basically means that they have a way to, like since you're scaling like horizontally, you will actually have, it will be really hard to have credentials spinning up new ones. So they use environment variables for credentials, which basically means that environment variables is provided to all the applications, and you're able to actually use them and change them, and it will be changed for all of these containers. And you might have seen this sort of page, the PHP info page. Love this one. So what happens is that this page is awesome for debugging. It's not awesome for having in production. I know your i.php, I know your underline PHP info 1, 2, 3. I know about them, so we'll find these ones. So, and they contain the environment variables, which is good for debugging, but it's very bad if somebody else sees this page. And if you combine this with the Git exposure thing, you could actually find some very fun like PHP info names, like trying to hide it super, I will find a way for you not to find it. But that was a way to find these really weird PHP info places. So don't put these, like don't put them up at all in production or whatever. Like disable PHP info, for example. You're not able to even run it in the production. There's also ways to actually, like, you have your environmental, like, and variables, and as soon as you launch your Docker or Heroku, you just demolish them, like remove them or whatever, and then place it as a file instead. Like that's one way to do it. And it's actually a good method, because that means that it doesn't matter if you're exposing environment variables somewhere else, they will be inside the file, but they won't be inside the file in your repository. That's two different things. You should never have credentials in your repository. And also not having the PHP info exposed, of course. And another nice prevention, we look for it. Detectify looks for this. So we have this as a service. Johan will talk about Detectify after my speech, and he will also make a demo about it, so you can see what's going on. The last thing I will talk about is a story about a $30,000 email. Like, I give everything out with that title. You will know what will happen, right? So GitHub Search rocks. GitHub Search is awesome. Also mentioning Slack in the beginning, like GitHub Search is so good, hackers are actually scraping it for credentials. And Runa Sandvik at Forbes, she wrote an article about this a few years ago and saying that people are actually gathering AWS credentials to launch applications and to mine Bitcoin, for example. So people are getting like a huge bill for mining Bitcoins on their servers, but somebody else is getting the Bitcoin because they were stealing credentials from GitHub. And Amazon actually went out and said that we are actively looking for credentials on GitHub. And when I saw this, I was like, okay, you know about spear phishing. Spear phishing means that you're targeting a company specifically and sending them a very, very customized email trying to fool them to give you some information, basically credentials or whatever. But what if you do spear searching on GitHub? What if you like target a company? You go inside LinkedIn, look at all their developers, look at these developer names, find them on GitHub, look at their repositories, look at the repository history, and try to see what you can find. You can also look at the organization on GitHub. Maybe all these employees have some really old stuff, or accidentally I put something publicly, or open sourced internal application, but in the old commit history there were some credentials there. So I was like, okay, let's see if this works. So I started working with some companies that actually allowed me to look for this. One was Zalando, and pretty fast I was like, okay, this is like Testroid. It's like a test bed for testing your app on Android. And I was like, yeah, this works. Like let's change company. I tried Groupon, and this was a Salesforce login. Salesforce is basically a CRM on crack. Like, it's crazy. You can get so much information out of Salesforce. And I tried these credentials. Like, I knew that they were allowed me to it. And what happened was that when I tried them, it posted me with, your password has expired. And I was like, okay, I'm not touching it anymore. This proves that I'm in. And I told them, and they were like, oh, shit, sorry. It was just a test system. And I was like, holy shit, no, it wasn't. Also, a proof of concept that this commit history thing works. It's like, the red thing here is what they've deleted, and the green thing is what they've added. What basically sees that they like, oops, holy shit, XXX, insert. And they forget about the history of the Git repository and accidentally left them in the history. And you're just able to go back and like, it says XXX, let's look at the history. It doesn't say XXX anymore, let's use it. Another meta was finding GitHub credentials on GitHub for Salesforce. These were old ones and super sucky passwords, but anyway, it was still like, okay, so he works at GitHub and does this. It's crazy. And I started doing this, and some of the companies that I found, I was like, holy shit, this is bad. So one company I found the Salesforce login to. And I know one of the people in the security team there, and I tried them out. Friday night, like 2:30 or something, I send an email to him, because the problem was that I use the credentials and I get into the Salesforce. Like, that's the first warning. And I started looking around and like, I'm an admin on this company. And this is a huge company. It's like hilariously huge. And I was like, I'm admin to this Salesforce account. I could see everything. So I just create an email, and I said like, long time no see, Jay. You should probably read this now. He was like, okay. Getting back to me 2 minutes later, like, what number can I reach you at? And he called me 2:30 in the morning, Friday evening. That's how I spend my Friday nights. I was like, hey Jay, how are you? Listen, so I found some credentials on GitHub. Like, yeah, so they're to Salesforce. Yeah, it's a user called ConsoleBot. Silence. Yeah, so I can basically see everything. I'm basically an admin to your Salesforce account. I can see like dashboards, everything, like your internal messaging, all your clients, all your sales reports, everything. Like, silent. Fuck, shit. Send me the report, I'll get back to you, click. And I was like 2:30 in the morning, like, what the hell happened there? I send him the report, I send him some screenshots. Like, I knew that he's a very offensive guy in terms of security. Like, he wants me to hack them as deep as possible because he wants to get the budget in on actually providing good security. So it's a win-win together with them. So what happened was that a few days later, I get a text from him, like, money's coming your way. And I was like, what? Go inside my email, and suddenly I have a bounty from HackerOne with $30,000 in it, which is the highest paid bounty on HackerOne, actually. So that was kind of cool. That's it. I don't know, questions now, later, now? I'll be here, I'll be for the bar as well, but shoot.
Did you read Sebastian, no, sorry, the kernel guy, Daniel Stenbeck, he wrote a blog entry about URLs this day, in fact.
Yeah.
And actually, there's different RFCs.
Of course.
One that
Why
actually
should it?
specifies what a URL is, and another one that specifies how browsers interpret them.
And they differ, right?
They differ.
Surprise. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, absolutely crazy.
If someone wants to get into pen testing, like what would the first steps be? Like the resources?
I would say there's a book like running around in our office called The Tangled Web. In terms of like web pen testing, I would recommend that one. It's Michal Salovsky, The Tangled Web. I would recommend that one. It's a few years old, but it still applies to all the like relevant stuff and all the security issues basically happening now. You can always apply that to happening in the past as well. I would also like read a bunch of blogs. There's a bunch of like, I don't do pen testing at all. I just like work with companies that allow me to hack them. Like I don't have like my test bed is like 500 companies. So which basically means that I work differently than a pen tester. The examples I showed you where I'm actually signing into the companies, that's because I know that they allowed me to it before. But I would never do that to a company that it didn't know. But in pen test world, that's something that you should do, and you should gather more data to penetrate further. But that's totally different from what I'm doing. So I try to, like, if I don't know about the company and I don't know the people, I always stop at the proof of concept, like being able to show that there's an issue. And in this like white hat community, like this bug bounty program thing, there's a bunch of knowledge. And we try to consolidate that inside Detectify, but there's also like so many blogs doing this, like search for Bug Bounty 101. There's a bunch of like super great information about like what type of vulnerabilities are people being affected by today. And there's also companies on HackerOne posting publicly, like Twitter is like showing all the vulnerabilities that they had. Shopify doing the same thing. Like there's a bunch of companies that is really like transparent on the issues that they have. And that's really helpful for people learning about it. So some people said that they learned more of reading public HackerOne reports than like doing the certification stuff for actually being a pen tester, which is interesting. Nothing? Okay, some demo then. Johan, applause.
Seems to work. Yeah. All right, so yeah, as you guys probably noticed, we're a lot of people here from Detectify, and I'm gonna show you a demonstration of our service. Oh yeah, there it is. So yeah. This is what the dashboard looks like when you first log in and haven't added the domain, if you exclude all these domains to the left here. So what you do to add a new domain is simply so you sign up. We have a 21-day free trial, and you can do as many tests as you want on 5 domains. So what you do is simply add a domain, click add domain, and then you need to, of course, verify the ownership of the domain. You can do this by using Google Analytics, a file, CMS, whatever you prefer. Since I'm an admin, I can, of course, do it. I won't test this site, though. So yeah, that's how simple it is. And to run a scan, you simply click Start a Scan, and you will get some information about what we're doing. And you will get an estimate time, how long it takes. So yeah, and I'm gonna show you how it looks like when it's done. So this is gonna go on for a while now. So when it's done, it's gonna look something like this. So this is a dashboard, the overview of the previous reports. As you can see, I have the monitoring on. We believe that security is something you need to stay up to date with, and since we add new vulnerabilities all the time, we think that you should scan your site at least every 14 days. So you can set an interval, whatever you prefer. We have some options, 30 days, 7 days. So 14 days, which is the standard, you will see some information on when will we start scan your site next time. So here, for example, we have a scan from 5th of May. So you see here that this site is a really small site, took 10 minutes. You have some information about what we did during those 5 minutes. So let's go, and yeah, I'm gonna show you some settings as well. So here you can set a lot of settings. For example, you can set a request limit. Our standard is 30, so we simulate about 10 users. So you can higher or lower that, whatever you prefer. It will affect your scan time. You can scan your site for subdomains. We look for about 2,000 common used subdomains if you check this one, but you can also add manually if you have a particular one you want to scan for. Basic auth login you can disallow and allow certain paths. And we also have some advanced settings like custom cookies, custom header. You can scan as a device like an iPhone or Nintendo if you would like to. This is some of the things we check for OWASP Top 10. You can deselect some of these things if you, for some reason, don't want to check for all of them. And by default, we block all analytic services. Uncheck those if you want to make your marketing team happy. So yeah, let's take a look at one of these reports then. So here you have some more information, when it was ran, how long it took, and if you expand this one here, you're gonna see what we found. So for example, here we found some cross-site scriptings, missing SPF records, and so we grade this based on CVSS rating. So everything that is red, so that is a common use standard that up to 10. So we grade everything above 5 as critical. And these different color codes here explains that. So the red ones are critical, which is 5 and above, and then you have medium, notices, and information. If you, for example, expand one of them, you get some brief information about what it means and what can happen. And also, if you click one of these here, you will get some more information about what you can do or some additional resources. Here you can also tag this finding. So for example, if you believe you fixed it, you can tag it as mark as fixed. If you accept this risk, you think this is not a vulnerability, like we don't want to check for this anymore, then you can accept the risk, which means that we won't check for it the next time we run the scan. And you can also mark it as a false positive if we, as we rarely do, find something that shouldn't be there. You can send us an email and we will get back to you. Just send a brief comment and we will manually go in and look for it. Another thing you can do here is to, so for example, if you want, you're probably just more than one developer in your team. If you want to share the result with your coworkers, you can select specific findings. For example, if you just want the mediums and the criticals, you can export them either as a detailed report, summary report, or a summary report in JSON. I can show you, for example, how it looks like, what the report looks like. So. Over here, you can have the summary and the full report as well, which will download a PDF file that you can share with your team. Yeah, and you also probably noticed that you saw that you could export this to Trello as well. So we have some integrations that you set up for your specific domain under integrations. So we integrate with Slack, PagerDuty, HipChat, and Trello, and we also have an API key. If you also want your colleagues to go into the tool and take a look at it before you convince them to use us for full time, you can invite your team members. So as you can see some of my colleagues here. If you have a lot of domains, you don't want to have them give them permissions to start scans or do anything with the account. Just give them viewing permission, and they won't be able to do anything except viewing findings, view a results report. Yeah, so that is a quick overview over our tool. Do you have any not too technical questions? Yeah.
Do you have webhooks for like critical events being found or something?
Yeah, I was about to say it. You were too quick there.
Well, we have, like today we have, I think we have customized Slack right now, but the idea is, I don't know if you can provide your own webhooks, but I believe you might have the customization also. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's the integration. This is for testing in production, right? Something about like a CD or CI process doing this step. Absolutely. Like we don't recommend you to run it in production. We recommend you to run it in, I would say, staging first.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of stuff in production that you wouldn't find if you're running it in staging. So I would say it's like test it on staging first and then go nuts.
Yeah, so we believe to implement this in the development process as well as doing it as an ongoing security check for your site. Yep.
Can you run it in batch mode?
What was that?
Can you run it in batch mode as part of regression tests, just to get the numbers green or red light out of it?
I'm not sure.
Yes, right now with the integrations that we have, but the API is also open for actually fetching it from it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Any other questions? So yeah,
How many customers do you have?
we have about 100 incoming users every day, and we have, like I said, 21-day free trial. So yeah, we have a lot of inbound customers trying it all the time. So yeah, and go in and sign up for, you don't need to give a credit card or anything, so you can just sign up for the trial and use it for 3 weeks. All right, any other questions? Good, thank you.